Hello, everyone, and welcome inside a brand new episode of That Movie Is Ours Now. You know the drill. That's Spider-Man, that's a one-handed Morgan Freeman bobblehead, and my name is David Sugarman. That Movie Is Ours Now is a podcast that's all about talking to interesting people about the different movies that have changed, affected, impacted their lives in some way, big or small. So often when we watch movies, we tend to gravitate towards our favorite actors, or at least the ones who are starring in whatever piece we might be watching. Maybe we like the director, or by chance sometimes you're familiar with a producer. However, that all starts with the writing process, and that's what we're going to be diving into today with professional screenplay consultant Nick Fore. Nick has written coverage for over 1,000 scripts for screenplay competitions. He's working with writers that currently have project in development and one that's even slated to shoot next year. I discovered Nick through his TikTok, where he came up on my For You page, breaking down why characters in film work so well based on the writing. Sometimes it's characters based in reality. Sometimes it's characters in science fiction. Why we don't always need a likable protagonist. Why we're willing to root for people who aren't likable, and on down the list. How writing plays such a core element in all of these. And we'll talk to Nick about his career, how he got into this, some of his writing, and we'll break down the writing of really a sci-fi classic today, one that still really resonates today with so much of what the world is still going through, and that is 1999's The Matrix. The Matrix was such a big hit for so many reasons. Of course, there's the over-the-top sci-fi and action and all the leather and the slow-mo, and there's so much of it that spawned so many imitators and spoofs, and The Matrix became a pop culture phenomenon. The red and blue pill alone was so captivating, the discussion. And that goes into the next part of the film, that it was a blockbuster that felt like it was a high IQ blockbuster that delved into issues of capitalism and issues with society. What's better, truly, to live in ignorance, and is ignorance truly bliss, or would you rather see the world for how it is and try and change it and do your best to change it, and all of the other political and social ramifications and challenges that movie presents, that so many people are and functions of society are still grappling with today. So Nick will break down for us why the writing in that movie is so important, why it works as well as it does, and how that movie's meaning has changed over time. It still resonates in so many ways, but based on certain things that have happened with the movie and how our views on certain topics in society have changed and evolved over the years, so has people's view of that movie. I don't want to give away anymore because Nick explains this so well and in great detail, and talks about how the world is written so sharply and so well and so intricately that made that franchise, but especially that first movie that's now over 20 years old, so good and so important to the sci-fi genre. We're going to get right into it. Nick, this was an absolute blast. If you want to check him out, his website is right here below. I'll put his TikTok here below. It's a great place to see a little bit about what he's all about. And if you're interested in writing or starting writing, or just interested in the screenplay and movie world, Nick is a absolutely great follow. So let's dive right into it. This is a brand new episode of That Movie Is Ours Now with screenplay consultant Nick Fore.
You're that spider guy.
Spider bed.
Huh?
Spider bad.
You want answers.
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
And here he is, our next guest, screenplay consultant Nick Fore, coming to us all the way from the UK. And where exactly for the American audience, which I don't know the stats. I assume most of our audience is American. Where are you in the UK?
I am in the Lake District, which is basically around the northwest of England. Beautiful countryside. Picture whatever you think England is. that's where I am. It's like rolling hills, sheep everywhere, all the good stuff, man. Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard this before. Like, I listen to a lot of, you know what ASMR is?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
You have a very soothing voice.
Really?
I don't know if
Well,
that's a
that's
weird thing
nice,
to
man.
say. I know we literally just met like 90 seconds ago, but I
I'll
listen
take
like,
it.
you know, on top of like, you know, I just like can close my eyes when you're talking about the issues with 3-act structure. Let me tell you. And I was like, I'm not
Yeah,
even a writer. This is
that's
just
it.
I was literally
Yeah,
listening to ASMR just to calm down a few minutes ago, just because like it's
that's
something I
good,
do.
man.
And it
Well,
sounded
if
very, very similar as the guy was like pretending to sell me a burger or something.
that's funny, man. That's funny. I hope it doesn't put you to sleep while I'm
I
I'm
don't
chatting about 3 acts and stuff. But I actually get told quite a lot that I have quite a dull and monotonous voice. So you're probably one of the very few compliments that I've heard on it. So I appreciate you for
Oh,
that.
fantastic! And I think just like writing, it's all subjective, but I think those people are wrong. So, screenplay consultant, off the bat, it kind of sounds like Chandler Bing's job. Like nobody really knows what he does.
What is Chandler Bing's job?
So, what is I know your job encompasses a lot of things, but break down what a screenplay consultant is
Hmm.
and what you do.
Yeah, so basically, I read screenplays that are written by independent writers from all over the world, and I basically give constructive feedback on their screenplay. So it obviously varies very much in the issues that are involved with each script, but I take the script, read it, and then um, offer them the issues with it and give technical suggestions for improvement as well, and try and facilitate the kind of story that each individual writer is trying to tell, and kind of bring my feedback in alignment with what exactly I think it is that they're trying to speak about there, and then offer suggestions in alignment with that, but also considering things such as the actual marketability of the script as well, and how well it's going to work as a story in general.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you want to go right at it like a Neanderthal, sure, but I think we're shooting for a little more subtlety here, you know?
How do you go about just sort of, I guess, maybe understanding story structure? Because I'm somebody who watches a lot of movies, and I guess I have a general understanding of archetypes and how characters work. But how did you begin to gain a deeper understanding to be able to look at a script and see, these are where problems are, and not just where problems are, because that's kind of easy, but also here's a solution. What if we push this character or this plot point in X direction?
Mm. So I think to begin with, there was a lot of short films that I was watching to begin with. That kind of generated the interest that I have in films in general. But then to kind of answer your question, it's more to do with just experience of actually reading scripts and also supplementing that with other resources that I was ingesting as well. Lots of different books on the screenwriting craft and the craft of storytelling. Not just about screenplays as well, but just stuff that's applicable to novels or stage plays as well, and just generally what keeps an audience engaged is always something that I come back to when I'm giving notes to a writer. So what the main thing in a story is keeping the audience engaged and delivering compelling characters. So I kind of like use those two things as like the building block on top of what I build everything else of in terms of the suggestions that I give to the writers that I work with.
What inspired you to start getting on TikTok and start, giving people, advice, other than, of course, you're trying to draw some business, but it feels like a little bit more than that, because this is something you're really passionate about.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I also do write as well. So I find that the more and more scripts that I read and the more things that I watch, the more it helps me as a writer, and also in my ability to give notes to other writers as well. So that's also, a little bit aligned with a more selfish perspective to advance my own skills as
Sure.
well, but also in general, like from when I started putting the videos up, I was actually noticing I was getting a lot of comments from people saying that this is really, really helpful to me, and I've actually got back into writing a draft that I'd previously left before and stuff. So it was kind of quite inspiring to hear other people being encouraged by what I was saying and people finding value in it as well. and also to think about other pieces of work and other TV series and films of which to draw examples from with regards to specific principles of screenwriting. And that's also allowed me to, when I'm actually dealing with individual clients that I have, different writers, I have now a much broader range of references that I can offer them and very specific solutions, because I also every week deliver a like a 10-minute video essay, which people can sign up to. The links on my bio on my TikTok profile. So reading produced screenplays is has been really helpful for me to just offer something that can be useful and relevant to writers with regards to their own script. And I say that maybe you fell short with your own screenplay in this aspect, or maybe this scene could be stronger. And then I have a much greater kind of arsenal of scripts that I've actually read to be able to give them a more solid example for suggestion for improvement, basically.
So parlaying that into the Matrix, can you let's start there on, it's sci-fi and it's out of this world, and the red pill and the blue pill and everything going on. Why on the surface are we so willing to buy into this world that obviously shouldn't be relatable, but in so many ways was and is?
So yeah, that's a really good question, actually, man. I think it kind of takes two kind of tracks that you can look at it, and that's splitting it up into the journey of the protagonist, who's of course Neo in the Matrix, and also the story world itself. And the thing is, when we as an audience are supporting a character, we basically are seeing a version of ourselves or the people that we know, or to kind of extend it even wider, we're looking at our own human nature being reflected in us. And that's why there's so many traits that protagonists have that are relatable, or at least they're made relatable by showing us how a character acts or why they act in a certain way, and that develops empathy. And that's the most important thing that an audience has with the character, it's the empathy. So in the case of Neo, it's his lack of self-belief, which I think is very, very common amongst kind of a widespread audience, whether that be to do with people's position at work or their general self-esteem. I think in some way a lot of people can relate to that experience. And Neo's journey from being Thomas Anderson to Neo, and he's kind of splitting those two across those two identities as the film goes on, and his inner conflict basically charters the kind of oscillation between those two identities. That's definitely something that's very relatable to people, and it comes through very clearly. And that's ultimately what he finishes on. On the other side of the track is the story world that they're in, which is the Matrix. And as you said, it's a fantastical sci-fi world, but at the same time, it reflects so much of our understanding of the end of what the 20th century was in the Western world, in a capitalist state, essentially. So people saw that world and they recognized it, even though it was kind of embodied in this greater whole of the Matrix, the fantastical world of the Matrix.
Yeah, for sci-fi and big budget, fantasy or superhero films like that, they're sort of interesting where for as much, set design or big things that are going on, a lot of them tend to, at least towards the end, go back to certain tropes. And Neo is a lot like, we've seen a lot of different chosen ones and a lot of different prophecies over the years. So it takes some of that stuff that we're used to, but then obviously takes it in a much more, I don't want to sound snobby, but high IQ direction. How were they able to blend that, some of the Hollywood tropes that people really like in their action movies and elevate that and take it in a different direction in a way that it really worked and has become such a classic?
Yeah, I think that's a really strong observation, actually, because this is actually something that I kind of discourage writers from doing, which is sticking to the paradigms that you very much first hear of a lot of the time when you're first writing, and that's 3-act structure, hero's journey. And that's like something that we're seeing over and over again with like modern films and stuff. But I think the difference with the Matrix is that there is so many different themes that it crosses, and so many different ways in which it can be interpreted, that it's very sophisticated in its way of delivering that story and how it could be related to in reference to various different entities and facets. So, for example, there's Neo's journey himself is of course, as I said, like, synonymous with the hero's journey, which is very typical. But there's also very strong ties to Christian mythology as well, and his ascension as Jesus, and even a degree to which he's resurrected in the film as well. And you kind of see that in the second and third, but I'm not really too interested in those. But there's also a very strong critique towards capitalism in general, or with that in mind, any other kind of systemic form of oppression. You could easily align it with a comment against organized religion, or any other kind of power structures that are oppressive to people in some way. And also, even more recently, since both of the Wachowskis have transitioned, it's very much been talked about in modern times, and the film's kind of been refocused through the lens of the trans experience, which definitely was, of course, such a huge part in their cultivation of the film. But interestingly, if you look back to what they say about it, I think they very much diluted it down, because the corporate world basically wasn't ready for a trans story then, and it was produced by Warner Brothers, or at least one of the production companies. So now the conversation around transgender people is a lot greater than it was then. So it's kind of been refocused, and it stood the test of time as well. Like, all of those things that I've just talked about are still relevant and still applicable. So that's where I think that it stands out more so than a Hollywood trope. It stood the test of time, and it's very multifaceted and holds a universal experience for its audience.
As a writer, I really wanted to get your opinion on, a lot of times when you get into sci-fi movies, where, especially if there's a world that needs to be explained, a quest that needs to be go on, there tends to be a ton of explaining that needs to be done, because the audience needs to understand the rules of the world. And it's really easy to get bogged down in all that. What did The Matrix do to convey their world in a way that didn't bog down audiences, or didn't confuse people? It's particularly that first one, because at least I'm in the camp of I was so lost by the end of the second and most of the third.
This isn't real.
What is real?
Yeah, very true. And again, a good question, man, a strong question. I would encourage anyone to read the screenplay for The Matrix, which is like in the public domain now. And if you look to around page 30, and for those that don't know, a screenplay roughly attributes to about a minute a page. So this is around 25 to 30 minutes of the actual film if you're to watch it. There isn't actually an explanation of what the Matrix is until that point. The word The Matrix is, or the term The Matrix is used about 4 or 5 times before Morpheus actually explains to Neo what it is. If you started reading the screenplay at page 30 or page 25, or exactly when The Matrix is first mentioned, you might get exactly that sensation that you described, David, where it's like you're getting bogged down with really heavy exposition about this kind of fantastical world, and all the world building comes in. But what they do so effectively is generate curiosity in the audience, and it's actually tapping into a very strong kind of like part of our psychology as human beings, which comes right back to our kind of progression as species and evolutionary psychology, which is essentially we are curious beings, and we want to know answers. So by giving the audience the sense that there are answers to be given without throwing that straight at them within the first 20 pages or within the first act, which is typically in 3-act structure when you get most of the exposition and the world building for sci-fi and particularly fantasy genres, that's withdrawn a lot. So it leaves the audience asking questions, and then vitally as well, those questions are answered at the right moments. Because if there's too many questions that an audience is asking and they're not receiving the answers in time, then they're just going to get turned off, and they're going to lose their engagement. But the Matrix, I think, perfectly balanced that.
know when you were in college, or it's university over there, correct?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Uni?
Uni. Yeah,
Uni.
exactly. Yeah, for the Brits
You,
amongst us, uni.
you took a class diving into the Matrix and in some of the more um, philosophical aspects and politics. I want to dive into specifically the thing that everyone always talks about: the red and the blue pill. The red, I think, is remain. Oh no, the red is learning the truth. The blue is sort of ignorant. Remaining in ignorance. From a bigger philosophical standpoint, where does that conversation lead? I guess because it's interesting enough on the surface.
Yeah, it is, and it's such like a powerful kind of visual motif where we actually, I can picture the shot in my head now, which is a reflection in Morpheus's sunglasses, and we see Neo, and he's got his two hands out with the two pills and stuff. It's really powerful because it's basically offering a comment on, or it's offering Neo the choice of whether he wishes to be ignorant to the world that he's in, or whether he chooses to engage in finding out the truth. And the answer that leads him into is essentially the idea that a capitalist system exploits human energy for its own repetition and to continue its life cycle. That's of course something that Neo doesn't know at the time, but I think it opens a very interesting duality around an idea of false consciousness, which is a sect of like Marxist theory that's kind of been turned over by a number of different political philosophers since like the Communist Manifesto. And the idea of false consciousness is essentially when I'll give it to you in terms of how we understand the world today. So something like the way advertising delivers such a spectacle, and the way in which like a Ferrari might drive down the street and everyone's heads turns to look at it. It's basically the way in which capitalism fabricates a certain desire within people and generates a need to strive for a certain aesthetic or prestige, when basically if you were to strip everything down to what it means to be human, life should actually be much less materialistic than that. So and we see this with the character Cypher as well, who later on in the film he actually sells out the Nebuchadnezzar crew and basically releases the information of where they're going to be to the agents. And his whole conversation is around the fact that ignorance is bliss, and he would rather live in that world than face the kind of dirty truth of what life looks like in the real world. And I think we're kind of seeing that at the moment with a lot of political activism that's going on, particularly like Extinction Rebellion, which are huge in the UK, and Just Stop Oil, I believe the organization is, who are like, they threw like white paint all over the House of Parliament recently, and also like threw soup over a painting and super glued themselves to it as like an act of protest. And they're basically making exactly this point, that is, we cannot, we can't afford to be ignorant anymore to what capitalism is delivering to us. And they're essentially calling for an emancipation of the mind through an environmental thread, which has kind of like become the conversation, particularly over the last 20 years. Whereas I think that's probably slightly more focused, but is also dealing with the same questions that the Matrix is raising as well, which is essentially emancipating the mind to exist above and beyond what capitalism offers to us and what makes us think is valuable.
Yeah, it's so good, and poignant what you said, and also just selfishly, I love that actor. Is it Joe Pantoliano?
Yeah,
Who,
he's brilliant.
if you've seen any of his movies, you probably should have seen it coming that he was going to be a rat. I first
Exactly.
fell in love with him. Oh boy, I'm forgetting the character's name. I think it's Ralphie. I'm a big Sopranos fan.
Oh yeah, of course. Man.
And
Yeah.
then of course he's also sort of the same smarmy guy in Memento. Always sort of playing a likable jerk off.
Sneaky, yeah, like sneaky kind of revelation that he has a malevolent presence, I think, but not so much as some actors who are kind of outright villainous in the way they present themselves. There is always that undertone. And actually, if you do read the screenplay, like his role as being basically the snake and the informant is made a lot more explicit in the original screenplay that was written, or in the shooting script at least anyway, which I think was March '98, and they must have taken quite a lot of that out in the edit, or there was maybe another rewrite of the script before they actually shot it, because you kind of get a sense that he is going to betray, but it's made a lot more explicit in the initial write of the screenplay, which I think is a lot more effective how the film plays out, because revelations are really important for audiences, and those subversions to the story dynamic that the audience has otherwise formed in their head up until that point. And Cypher's a perfect example of that.
Always loved that scene where he's having dinner with one of the agents and he said, I know it's fake, but God, this steak and this wine is so good.
Exactly.
It encapsulates it, where, because it's easy to say, well, who would want to, live in ignorance? And it's like, well, sometimes, ignorance, it's a cliche, but ignorance, can be bliss. So I don't agree with Cypher, but I get it.
You empathize with him, you understand him, and you've seen what life is like at that point in the real world. And I think the scene that precedes that one, or maybe the one afterwards, I believe it's the one that precedes it, is the Nebuchadnezzar crew that are eating their like slop.
Oh, they're slop,
yeah,
food, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And they're talking about it being like tasty wheat and stuff like that. But it's essentially jail food. It's very well put. So it does contrast that, and it massively contrasts that, because then he's got this like really succulent steak and good wine that he's eating and drinking, and off the back of that you think he's not just a villain, he is motivated, even albeit selfishly. You can understand why he's making the choices that he is, and also it helps to make the kind of thematic discussion and moral discussion a lot more well-rounded as well. Like, most of us are aware of the issues that capitalism are bringing, but we're also very much complicit. So in some ways, we're all like Cypher. And that's a really poignant comment that I think that the Wachowskis made, particularly with that scene.
Want to get a few rapids fires before we let you out of here. First things first, when they make the Nick Fore story, who would you cast as yourself?
Ooh. I actually am writing a screenplay at the moment that's very much kind of based on my emotional truth, and I have followed a piece of advice that I've given recently on my TikTok, which is to picture an actor in mind whilst you're writing that. I know this was supposed to be quick fire, but my answer
is good.
I picked to play that character and kind of visualize who that character is as Toby Jones, who's a British actor that plays.
Sure.
You know him, yeah. He plays very kind of quite pitiful and pathetic characters. So yeah, that maybe speaks volumes for my degree of self-perception anyway. But Toby Jones would be the one, man. Yeah.
Now, given our discussion, if you weren't writing your story, who would be your go-to screenwriter? And they have full. The studio's not going to screw with them. This writer has got all the power in the world.
Yeah.
Who would you have write it if not yourself?
I think, like, a couple of my favorite screenwriters are American, but I would say for my story, I would have to give it to a British screenwriter called Amy Jump, who she writes most of the screenplays for her husband, who's a director called Ben Wheatley. His famous ones are Kill List, Sightseers, and A Field in England as well. And I think that her grasp on dark humor and rich and complex characters, I would like to say, would be able to encapsulate and portray my life in a way that I would probably be quite satisfied with. So Amy Jump. Yeah,
I think Amy Jump and Toby Jones need to get together for coffee soon.
That's a good combo, man. Yeah, for sure.
What's your desert island movie that, if you were going to a desert island, the movie you could play on repeat that would take you the longest to get sick of?
Maybe Castaway as like a manual.
That is some dark humor. That's a rough one.
No, but in terms of actually the film that I would like. I would probably say it would be Sightseers, I think, because
Okay.
that's one that I just mentioned that's directed by Ben Wheatley, and it's a horror comedy about a couple who go on a caravanning holiday, which eventually transpires to be his fulfilling his desire as a serial killer. And I would say I would go for that one because it's so quintessentially British and textured in terms of that's a lot of it shot around the Lake District as well, which is where I'm at the moment. So it would remind me of somewhere near home. So I think that would be the one. And it's also funny. It's dark, but it's funny. Yeah. So I think that ticks all the boxes.
Love that. Last one. What is the movie ending you would like to change, and what would you change it to?
You know what? I think I'm kind of satisfied with a lot of what I've seen.
Okay.
There's going to be one that's going to come to me, but I feel that
Nothing that keeps you up at night?
no, nothing that keeps me up at night yet. But I'm sure I will be kept up at night thinking about the answer to it, and then I'll have to drop you an email separately, but no one else is going to hear it.
Fair enough. What would be, before we let you go, just a couple things. What I guess would be your advice to people who maybe they're struggling as writers, maybe they want to get into it but don't know where to start? What would be your advice to a young, in your case, screenwriter who's trying to get into it, or at least start writing, that maybe can't?
I would say read scripts. Like, you just have to read scripts. You can read and watch as much as you read books and watch films as much as you like, but a film always starts with a screenplay, and particularly if you're an aspiring screenwriter, you have to get a good idea of what works in a script and what doesn't. So I would suggest alternating between reading screenplays from amateur writers and then also with screenplays of already produced films, particularly ones that films that you know quite well as well, so you understand why they work and you can spot that in the screenplay. And you definitely get a good idea of what not to do when you read a lot of amateur screenwriters. So that's very much equally as valuable as it is to know what to do as well. So yeah, I would say aim for like 3 to 5 a week to begin with, and then double down. It's probably going to take around 2 hours to read a screenplay, maybe slightly more when you're first starting. So read them. Yeah, that would be my advice.
Nick, this was so much fun. If people want to find you, either just to follow your content or they're interested in your services, getting your critiques, where can they find your website, your information, pricing, all that different stuff, so that they can find you and if they want to work with you? Yeah,
so you've already said, I'll remind everyone on TikTok, I'm at Nick Fore Consultant, and that's got a link straight to my website as well, which is nickfore.com. And on Instagram, I am nickfore_. And they're my channels, basically. I'm going to get on YouTube soon and start repurposing some of my TikToks into shorts. But you'll be able to find everything through my website, nickfore.com.
Nick, before we let you go, red or blue? You gotta get
It's got to be red, man, every time.
you gotta live in the truth.
I don't eat steak anymore, mate.